Hello, welcome to another episode of Fresh Thinking by Snowden Optiro. My name's Ian Glacken. I'm an executive consultant for Snowden Optiro here in beautiful Perth, Western Australia, where it's sunny. Today I'm joined again by Senzeni Mandava. Senzeni is our principal consultant in our Johannesburg office. Good morning, Senzeni.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Today we're going to talk about the issue of compliance in the mining industry, specifically the similarities and differences between Australia, which is where we are now, which has the JORC code, and South Africa, where Senzeni works, which has what we call the SAMREC code. Now, these are broadly the same sort of thing. The JORC code was last updated in 2012. The SAMREC code was updated in 2016. Mm-hmm. So where we're at, you permit me to, just for a few minutes, we're currently in a situation where we're looking to revise or update the JORC code. As I say, the JORC code has been around since 2012. We're now 2024, and it's unlikely that we're going to see a new version of the JORC code before 2025. So it will be 13, 14 years old by the time it's updated. Whereas what's happened in South Africa is that the SAMREC code was updated quite a few recently. Yep. So we're going to explore a little bit the differences between compliance under the JORC code in Australia and under the SAMREC code in South Africa. For companies that are listed in South Africa, they have the obligation to generate a CPR.
That's correct.
How often do they have to do it, and what is a CPR?
All right. A CPR is a competent person's report. So this is like a technical report that actually reports out the mineral resources and reserves of a mining company. So this is a requirement if the company is listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange.
Same place.
Yes. So it's part of the requirements where these mining companies, which are listed on the Joburg Stock Exchange, to compile a competent person's report for the major stakeholders and shareholders, so that they are satisfied with the commodities that they're reporting.
And what sort of things do they need to include in that CPR as a mandatory item?
So with the CPR, the SAMREC code requires that you need to generate a cash flow, which is a requirement. Unlike with the JORC code, I think that's not a requirement, right?
That's true.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Yes. So these CPRs, they're having been involved with South African listed companies that are here in Australia, Goldfields, for example. They're quite involved, and there's quite a lot of work. And we have a Section 12 of the JSE, JSE being the Johannesburg Stock Exchange
that's
listing
right.
rules, and these listing rules they're quite prescriptive about the requirements of these CPRs.
Yes.
So what I would say with respect to Australia is that there's no compliance requirement like that. There's no reporting. In Canada, obviously, we have the 43101 or the technical report. Yeah. In America, we have the technical report summary, and in South Africa, as you've just been saying, we have the CPR. Yeah. In Australia, we don't have any requirement for periodic reporting. Okay. So that's different.
All right. Yeah.
So another difference between, I guess, the ASX, the Australian Securities Exchange, and the JSE, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, is the fact that most of the announcements have to be certified by a readers panel. Tell us about that.
Yes, so a readers panel, these are independent technical people that are actually in the industry for that particular industry. For example, the mining industry. They don't work per se for the JSE. They're actually subcontracted to actually review these competent persons report on behalf of the Joburg Stock Exchange, and actually advise if they've actually followed through the guidelines of for reporting purposes. So you have them review and actually provide comments back to the companies that have compiled them, and advise them or clarify or explain further or anything missing in these competent persons reports. So you'd find that a CPR can go through 3, even up to 4 additions until they're satisfied that it's been complied to. And these are, it's like a secret organization. Let me put it that way. Nobody knows who they are, which is good. So so they're independent as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And would a normal market release, say discussing a resource update or drilling, would that have to go through a readers panel or not? Or is it just the CPRs?
Yes, absolutely. It will have to go through the readers panel because they would actually need to provide the opinion regarding that market release.
Right. So that's a big difference between what happens in South Africa and what happens in Australia. What happens in Australia is that companies, they want to get their market release out straight away. Two reasons. Mm-hmm. One is they have a thing called continuous disclosure. Mm-hmm. And continuous disclosure means that the companies have an obligation to update their shareholders, mm-hmm. the ASX, on what's happening. So that means that things have to come out in a very short space of time. Right. And the other reason is that companies want to take advantage of markets opening. So it's very interesting to contrast what happens in South Africa, where there is a finite period of time between a company issuing a market release or a statement and it actually appearing in the public domain, whereas in Australia a company would issue a market release at 5 o'clock one night, and then the next morning it would be released on the ASX.
Okay.
So if we're looking at the two countries and the two systems, and the question is, would we ever have a situation where we're going to have this sort of pre-certification in Australia? I'd say it's not going to happen. Now, having said that, there are groups, and one group would be the corporate regulator, which is ASIC, Australian Securities Investment Corporation. That would be a group that would want to see this sort of thing happening. But I think because of market pressures, we're not going to see it in Australia. So that is quite a difference between what's happening in South Africa and what's happening in Australia.
It's quite different. And so you also find that with the JSE listing, if there's any material changes to the company, if they've acquired another asset, they would need to update and notify the shareholders and stakeholders, and all of this is done through the JSE as well. So that's part of the requirements for in the SAMREC code. Yeah.
So one thing that's in the SAMREC code, because as we've said, the SAMREC code was released in 2016, JORC code last updated in 2012, is that we have an expanded Table 1. Tell us about Table 1 in the SAMREC code.
The Table 1 in the SAMREC code is quite similar to the JORC code, really, but then it actually itemizes what you need to include in your CPR. So it guides you on exploration. You need to talk about the legal tenure, how you've done your drilling, how you've conducted your estimates, the laboratories that you've used, are they accredited, QA/QC, which is a very important aspect now as well, and reasonable prospects for eventual economic extraction. So you find that most companies never used to do that. For instance, if they're reporting an open pit resource, they'll just report the entire resource. But then now you need to actually include some economic parameters to report out probably from a resource optimized shell that satisfy these reasonable prospects for eventual economic extraction to be able you to actually say this is a mineral resource. So those are some of the things that are quite critical and important.
Yes, and what I would say, looking at the SAMREC Table 1 versus the JORC Table 1, the SAMREC Table 1 is more comprehensive because it was released 5 or 6 years after the JORC Table 1.
Yes.
And because I'm peripherally involved in the update of the JORC code, what I can say is that the update to Table 1 in the next iteration of the JORC code, which may be next year as we've discussed, will be more like the SAMREC code. So we're going to see more information being included.
Yeah.
But having said that, we're still not going to get to the stage in Australia where we have to write a CPR or a technical report or a technical report summary. We have the situation where we have a market release and we have to include the Table 1. So things are changing in Australia, but they're not going to be the same as in South Africa.
Yeah. So perhaps maybe you could just expand on, for example, Table 1 summary. the differences with that.
Yes,
in
yes,
the technical
that's a
report.
good point. Yeah, so one thing that's required in Australia is because we don't have this formal reporting, we have the table 1, which is at the back of the market
report,
release typically. But then we need to have what we call a plain language summary, and those of you that are involved with writing market releases, you'll recognise when I say section 5.8.1. This is the ASX listing rules. So that is as close as you get to a pro forma type of report in Australia. So that is something that is in market releases, and it's something that we may see expanding in the future. But I don't think we're going to get to the stage where we actually have a formal reporting component like we do in America, Canada, or South Africa.
Yes, which are structured, because you find with the NI 43 or 101, they actually transcribe how you write the technical report. No, even though, as I've said to you, there are groups in Australia here that would like to see more formal reporting. Yes.
I don't think we're going to get to that stage for a number of reasons which we've discussed.
Yes.
Okay, Senzeni, well, thanks for that. It's a very interesting topic, and we had quite a bit to say on that.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian.
So that's another episode of Fresh Thinking by Snowden Optiro. If you like that podcast, please subscribe, and there'll be many more like that on a range of topics. Also, you can find our podcasts on the Snowden Optiro website, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Libsyn, and wherever all good podcasts are found. Thank you.
Thank you.